Out here in this town, where church bells tolled distant from the valley floor, carrying whispers of judgment on the wind, solitude had become my shield. I'd built this life alone, mending what broke, tending what grew, all to keep my past buried deep. The Sapphic truths I'd hidden, the women who'd cracked my heart open in another town, the stares that followed, threatened to surface here, in this tight-knit place where eyes watched every shadow. Dusk settled heavy over the ridge, the kind of quiet that presses into your bones like damp earth after rain. I stood on the porch, hands gripping the rail, the wood rough under my palms, feeling the isolation wrap tighter. But then came the knock, sharp against the door, pulling me from the fading light. A new neighbor? The house next door had stood empty for years. I opened it slow, and there she was, face framed in the porch light, stirring something buried, a memory like the scent of wild sage after storm. Morning started the same. I'd rise with the first gray light filtering through the curtains, boots hitting the floorboards with a thud that echoed my resolve. Coffee brewed strong in the chipped pot, steam rising thick as I poured it black, no sugar to soften the edge. Out to the garden first, knees sinking into the cool soil, hands pulling weeds that gripped like old regrets. The earth smelled rich, damp from night dew, and I'd lose myself in the rhythm, tugging, turning, planting seeds that promised something steady. No one to share the harvest, but that was the point. Solitude kept the questions at bay. Fences needed mending after every windstorm, wire twisted, and posts leaning like weary shoulders. I'd haul the tools from the shed, hammer swinging heavy in my grip, nails biting into wood with each strike. Sweat beaded on my skin, mixing with dust that clung like the town's assumptions. They saw me at the feed store, loading sacks alone, and their eyes lingered. "Still holding out, Martha?" Old Tom would say, his voice gravelly over the counter, implying spinsterhood without the word. I nodded, paid quick, and left, before the pity settled. In this place, single meant unfinished, a puzzle missing its male piece, but I knew better. My heart carried scars from women who'd seen me whole, only to fade under the weight of whispers and closed doors. Those memories surfaced, unbidden, like roots, pushing through cracked ground. There was Ellie, back in the valley town, 20 years gone. Her laugh cut through church socials, eyes meeting mine across crowded rooms with a spark no sermon could dim. We'd steal moments in the barn loft, hay scratching our backs, her breath warm against my neck. "This is us," she'd whisper, fingers tracing my arm, bodies fitting like puzzle edges long separated. But the town found out, rumors spreading faster than wildfire through dry grass. Her family pulled her away, married her off to a man with steady hands and empty eyes. I left soon after, driving west until the Acai hills swallowed the pain. Another, Sarah, came later in a brief city stint. She worked the diner, pouring coffee with a smile that hid her own secrets. Nights in her apartment, curtains drawn tight, we'd talk until dawn, her head on my shoulder, the world outside forgotten. But pressure mounted, her mother's calls, the sideways looks at work. She chose safety, and I chose the road again. Each loss carved deeper, teaching me solitude's cold comfort. Better alone than exposed, heart thudding against a cage of my own making. Still, longing crept in, quiet as fog rolling down the ridge. I'd pause mid-chore, hoe in hand, staring at the horizon where sky met endless fields. What if? The question hung, unanswered. My body remembered touches, the curve of a hip under flannel, lips soft in the dark. But here, in this hollow, such thoughts were dangerous. The church bells tolled Sundays, calling folks to pews where sermons warned of straying paths. I'd stay home, pretending the fence needed one more nail, while inside, desire twisted like wire in a storm. Suppression came easy after years. Bury it deep, like seeds in winter soil, waiting for a thaw that might never come. Town runs amplified the isolation. The general store, with its creaking screen door, felt like a stage. Mrs. Hargrove behind the counter, her smile thin as she tallied my purchases. "No family coming for the holidays?" she'd probe, eyes flicking to my ringless hand. Assumptions piled like cordwood. Divorced, maybe, or waiting for the right man. I mumbled replies, grabbed my bags, and escaped to the truck, engine rumbling as I fled the weight of their gaze. Neighbors waved from porches, but conversation stayed shallow. Weather, crops, the price of feed. No one asked deeper. No one saw the woman beneath, the one who'd loved fiercely and paid for it. I drove home from one such run, the truck's cab tight with unspoken fears, the town's gaze heavy on my back. But as I pulled into my drive, the rumble started low. A moving truck, dust, kicking up the gravel road, turning into the drive next door. That changed one crisp afternoon. I was out by the barn, stacking hay bales, muscles aching from the lift, when the rumble started low. A moving truck, dust kicking up the gravel road, turning into the drive next door. The old place, weathered boards and sagging roof, hadn't seen life in a decade. I straightened, wiping sweat from my brow, watching as boxes piled on the porch. Figures moved. Movers, mostly. But then she stepped out, the woman from that dusk knock, directing with a wave. Our eyes met across the fence, brief but steady. She raised a hand, smile tentative, pulling me toward words I hadn't planned. She waved again the next morning, standing by the fence line with a coil of rope in her hand, the sun catching the edges of her dark hair. I hesitated, hoe still in my grip from the garden, dirt caked under my nails. But something in her stance, open, unhurried, pulled me over. "Morning!" she called, voice carrying clear across the wire. "I'm Clara, just moved in. This place is something else." I nodded, wiping my hands on my jeans, feeling the rough denim against my skin. Up close, her smile crinkled the corners of her eyes, warm like sunlight, breaking through morning fog. I mumbled my name, Martha, and offered to help with the unloading if she needed. She accepted quick, relief flashing in her face, and that was how it started. Simple, reluctant steps across the boundary I'd drawn so tight. The truck groaned under the weight of boxes as I hauled them inside, muscles straining against the cardboard edges that dug into my palms. Clara directed from the doorway, her hands gesturing steady, calluses visible from whatever work she'd done before. They weren't soft city hands. There was grit there, like mine from years of fence wire and soil. "Watch that corner," she said, steadying a lamp as I passed, her fingers brushing mine accidental. The touch lingered a beat too long, warm against the cool morning air, and I pulled back, focusing on the stairs creaking under my boots. Inside, the house smelled of dust and fresh paint, empty rooms echoing our steps. She unpacked books first, spines worn, titles on poetry and old maps, stacking them on shelves with care. I caught glimpses, a photo frame face down, a scarf draped over a chair, hints of a life left behind. "City get too loud?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. She paused, wiping her brow, smile fading just a touch. "Something like that. Needed space to think." No more words, but the weight in her voice hung, like unspoken baggage unloaded last. Afternoons brought more fence talks. I'd be out repairing a post, hammer thudding rhythm when she'd appear with coffee in a thermos, steam curling up. "Thought you might need this," she'd say, handing it over the wire, her fingers steady on the metal. I'd take it, our hands close enough to feel the heat from her skin, and sip slow, the bitterness grounding me. Her warmth cut through my reserve like sun on frost. Easy questions about the soil, the best trails, drawing me out despite myself. I'd answer short at first, directions to the creek, warnings about rattlesnakes, but her smile encouraged more, crinkling again, inviting without pushing. One day she leaned on the fence, elbows on the top rail, and asked about the town. "Folks seem close-knit. What's it like living here year-round?" Her eyes held mine, genuine, but brushing too near the isolation I'd wrapped around myself. I shrugged, hammer pausing mid-swing. Quiet. Keeps to itself. Inside, tension coiled, her curiosity like a probe against old wounds. What if she asked deeper? What if she saw? That pull started subtle, a tug in my chest when she'd laugh at a story about the coyotes howling at dusk. Her smile lit something buried, the curve of her lips reminding me of touches long denied. I'd watch her hands as she gestured, strong, veins tracing, paths under tanned skin, and feel my pulse quicken, heat rising, unbidden. But fear clamped down hard. Exposure here meant stares turning to whispers, church bells tolling judgment louder. I pushed it back, focusing on the fence, the wire taut under my fingers. Distance felt safer. Yet she'd linger, sharing a tool from her shed, a pliers for a stubborn nail, and our talk stretched, her warmth chipping at my walls. Left the city after a job went south, she said once, vague, eyes on the horizon. Family stuff, too. Expectations that didn't fit. The words echoed my own hidden layers, stirring a reluctant empathy. I nodded, saying little, but inside, attraction flickered like embers in dry grass. Dangerous, if fanned. Tension built in those small exchanges. She'd ask about the winters, how the snow piles deep, isolating everything. And I'd describe the silence, the way it amplifies every creak. Her questions brushed my solitude, casual but probing, like fingers tracing a scar. You always been alone out here? She'd say, voice light but eyes searching. I'd freeze inside, heart thudding against ribs, and change the subject to the garden, pointing out rows of beans pushing through soil. The pull grew stronger, her presence a magnet against my resolve. Walking back to my porch one evening, after helping fix her gate hinge, I felt it deep. The way her shoulder had grazed mine, the scent of her soap mixing with sweat. Desire twisted low, but fear won out. I retreated inside, door shutting firm, breath steadying in the empty room. No room for this. Not here. Evenings on her porch started next. She'd call over as the sun dipped, offering a chair, and talk about the stars emerging sharp against the black. I'd go reluctant, sitting with space between us, but her warmth drew words from me. Bits about the ridge hikes, the wildflowers, and spring. One night, the air cooled fast, crickets starting their chorus, and she leaned forward, elbows on knees. This place feels like it holds secrets, she said, voice dropping low. The question hung, personal now, brushing too close to my guarded heart. I felt the shift, tension thickening like fog in the hollow, leading somewhere I couldn't name. That evening on the porch, the air hung still, thick with the scent of cooling earth and pine sap from the ridge. Clara sat beside me, her chair creaking soft as she shifted, the space between us narrow now, charged like the moments before a distant storm breaks. We'd talked easy at first, about the owls calling low, the way the stars pressed close in the rural dark, but her questions turned inward, probing the quiet I'd guarded so long. This hollow feels timeless, she said, voice dropping, eyes on the horizon where the last light bled into shadow. Like it holds people in place. I nodded, fingers tracing the arm of my chair, wood splinter rough under my thumb, feeling the pull of her gaze. Then she turned, full on me, her face lit faint by the lantern's glow. Why do you live all alone out here, Martha? The words landed heavy, like a stone dropped into still creek water, ripples spreading fast through my chest. Curiosity laced her tone, genuine, no edge of judgment. But it froze me solid inside. Vulnerability surged, raw and unbidden, the question echoing straight to the heart of what I'd buried. Alone? It wasn't just choice, it was survival, woven into every fence post I'd set, every row of soil I'd turned. My breath caught, the porch rail digging into my back as I leaned away, heart thudding against ribs like hammer on nail. She didn't know, couldn't, how that simple ask cracked open the door to my hidden self, the Sapphic truths I'd chained down deep in this town. Memories flooded then, sharp as barbed wire snagging skin. Back in the valley, before I fled west, there was Rose. She'd come to town as the new school teacher, her laugh carrying over the schoolyard like wind through cottonwoods. We met at the harvest fair, her hand steadying mine as we reached for the same apple from the stand, fingers brushing warm, electric. Nights followed in her small cabin, curtains drawn against prying eyes, her body fitting mine like roots twining underground. "This is home," she'd murmur, lips on my collarbone, hands mapping paths no man had traced. But the town whispered, first hints, then outright stares at church, the pastor's sermon on unnatural ways hitting too close. Her brother found letters, confronted her with fists clenched, family pulling her east to a marriage that promised normalcy. I watched her go, truck kicking dust down the road, my own heart splintered like dry fence wood. That retreat drove me here, to this hollow building walls higher than the ridge. Solitude my only anchor against the pain of love's lost to judgment's weight. Clara's face shifted as I sat silent, her eyes narrowing just a touch, recognition flickering there like embers catching. She sensed it, more than the words, the pause heavy between us, the way my hands clenched white on the chair arms. No pity in her gaze, just a quiet knowing, as if she'd walked similar shadowed paths. "I didn't mean to pry," she said soft, but her voice held no retreat, implying layers of her own she'd left unsaid in the city haze. The air thickened, crickets pausing their chorus, the world narrowing to her steady breath, and my pulse racing wild. What did she see? The woman who'd loved women, hidden under flannel and calluses, or just another solitary soul in the rural quiet? Stakes rose sharp then, fear clashing hard against the budding pull between us. This place didn't forgive difference. Church bells tolled warnings every Sunday, folks gathering in tight circles, eyes scanning for the stray thread in their woven lives. One slip, one whisper from her lips, and my life unraveled. Stares at the store turning cold, tools borrowed no more, isolation twisting from choice to cage. Yet, here she sat, warmth radiating like sun on chilled earth, drawing me despite the risk. Connection tugged low in my gut, dangerous, alive, her presence stirring desires I'd suppressed like weeds in fallow ground. I wanted to bolt, porch door slamming behind me, but her eyes held, empathetic, waiting. The town pressed in, judgments rooted deep as sagebrush, but so did this spark, fragile, tempting. What if she understood? What if she didn't? Silence stretched awkward, the lantern flickering shadows across her face, highlighting the line of her jaw, strong yet soft. I swallowed hard, throat dry as dust, and stood slow, chair scraping back. "Coffee," I managed, voice rough, gesturing toward my kitchen light spilling faint through the screen. She rose too, no hesitation, following as I led inside, the door creaking shut like a held breath released. The pot still warm on the stove, steam rising as I poured 2 mugs, black and strong, hands steadying with the ritual. We sat at the scarred table, knees close under the wood, the exchange deepening in the quiet warmth, her gaze meeting mine over the rim, pulling words I hadn't spoken in years. We sat at the scarred table, 2 mugs of black coffee cooling between us, the question still hanging in the air. Clara sipped slow, eyes on the rim, giving me space after that question hung heavy. But the silence pulled words from her first, unforced, like water finding cracks in dry soil. "Family back east," she started, voice low against the tick of the clock. The coffee steamed between us, mugs warm in our hands, the kitchen light casting long shadows across the scarred table. Clara sipped slow, eyes on the rim, giving me space after that question hung heavy. But the silence pulled words from her first, unforced, like water finding cracks in dry soil. "Family back east," she started, voice low against the tick of the clock. They had plans for me. The right job, the right man waiting at the end of it all. City life fit their picture, but it choked mine. Her fingers traced the mug's edge, knuckles pale, and I saw the weight there, expectations like fence posts driven too deep. I nodded, my own regrets stirring faint, but held back, the steam blurring her face just enough to ease the pull. Days blurred after that, proximity turning the hollow small. She'd appear at dawn, crossing the yard with a basket of eggs from her hens, fresh and still warm. "Trade for some of that garden greens?" she'd ask, smile crinkling, and I'd hand over carrots pulled that morning, our fingers brushing in the exchange. The touch sparked, brief but electric. Skin rough from her unpacking, meeting my calluses from the soil. Talks followed over the fence, her leaning close, elbow on the rail, sharing more fragments. Mother called last week, still pushing the idea of settling down proper. Her laugh came dry, edged with something raw, like wind scouring a ridge. I listened. The sun warming my back, feeling my walls shift just a hair. Regret slipped out then, unbidden. Had someone once. Town. Like this one. Pressures broke it. No names, no details, but the ache echoed in my voice. Suppressed desires rising like sap in spring wood. Trails called us out together, reluctant at first. I'd head up the ridge path alone, boots crunching gravel, but she'd fall in step, water bottle swinging from her hip. Mine company, she'd say, and I'd shrug, heart thudding already. The air thickened with pine and dust, our arms brushing accidental as the path narrowed, her skin warm against mine, sending heat low in my gut. We'd walk in shared silences, thick with unsaid words, her breath steady beside me, the rhythm pulling me closer despite the fear. One afternoon, sweat beaded on her neck, tracing a path I couldn't ignore, and I looked away sharp, focusing on the canyon drop. Desire twisted, bodies leaning in the wind, but I pulled distance, stepping ahead. Need to check the fence up top, I'd mutter, hammer from my pack thudding against a post, driving nails home to ground myself. Yet her empathy drew me back, voice soft over the echo. Takes time to mend what's bent. No push, just understanding, failing my try at walls. Town gossip stirred then, subtle as smoke from a distant fire. I'd drive to the store, engine rumbling low, and feel eyes linger longer at the pump. Mrs. Hargrove leaned over the counter one day, bags rustling as she packed my flour. Heard your new neighbor's single, too. Folks talking already. Her smile thin, implication hanging like damp fog. 2 women alone. What did that mean in this hollow? Isolation weighed heavier, the truck's cab feeling tight on the ride home. Judgments, rooting deep as burrs in wool. Clara heard it too, over evening coffee on her porch, chairs close enough our knees nearly touched. Overheard at the post office, small places chew on newcomers. Her hand rested on the armrest, inches from mine, and I felt the threat amplify, whispers threatening the fragile space we'd carved. But her gaze, held steady, empathetic, pulling confession from me. Been hiding regrets long enough, women I let go to keep peace. The words hung, fragments of suppressed fire, her nod slow, drawing me nearer. Try-fail cycled on, my attempts at distance crumbling under her pull. Mornings I'd rise early, chores stacking high, hauling water from the well, bucket slushing cold against my legs, to avoid her wave. But she'd find me at noon, sharing a sandwich under the oak, bread crust rough, cheese melting in the heat. Our shoulders touched then, accidental, her warmth seeping through flannel, breaths mingling close. I'd shift away, heart racing, but fail, staying for her stories of city nights that felt too crowded, family ties like ropes fraying, empathy in her voice hooked deep, regret over my own silenced love surfacing in nods, silences thick with what we didn't say. Evenings brought more, her inviting me to fix a loose shutter, ladder steadying under my grip as she handed tools up, eyes meeting mine from below, strong and unflinching. The brush of her hand on my ankle as I climbed down sent shivers, attraction heightening in the fading light, but fear clamped, town eyes watching from the road. I retreated to my porch, door shutting firm, breath ragged in the quiet. Gossip swelled, amplifying the isolation's bite. A neighbor stopped by unannounced, truck idling loud, asking after Clara's intentions with pointed chin toward her house. I stood firm at the gate, words clipped, sending him off, but the weight lingered, hollow feeling smaller, judgments pressing like storm clouds gathering. Clara found me later, walking the trail edge, her step matching mine. Heard the talk, doesn't scare me off. Arm brushing again, deliberate now, the contact lingering, unsaid words hanging heavy as the air before rain. I tried pulling ahead, voice tight. Better keep space. But failed. Her hand catching my sleeve gentle, empathy in the touch drawing me back, regrets over desires unspoken, bubbling close. That night, wind picked up sharp, rattling windows like impatient fists. I lit the lamp early, shadows dancing on walls, when thunder grumbled low over the ridge. Rain hit, sudden, sheets, lashing the roof, trapping us both. Her at my door, soaked, seeking shelter as the storm spilled vulnerability out. Rain hammered the roof like fists on dry earth, wind howling through the cracks in the doorframe. Clara stood dripping on my porch, flannel shirt clinging dark to her shoulders, hair plastered to her neck. "Storm caught me mid-walk," she said, voice raised over the roar, eyes meeting mine with that steady pull. I stepped aside, no words needed, and she crossed the threshold, boots leaving mud prints on the worn boards. The cabin shrank around us, walls closing in with the thunder's rumble, trapping us in the lamplight's glow. I handed her a towel from the hook, rough cotton scratching her skin as she dried her face, and busied myself stoking the fire. Flames crackled low, casting shadows that danced like unspoken fears. We settled by the hearth, chairs pulled close, the heat seeping into our bones. Steam rose from her clothes, mixing with the scent of wet pine drifting through the window. Silence fell thick at first, broken only by the fire's pop and the rain's steady drum. Then she spoke, voice soft against the storm. "This place, it's got a way of stripping you bare. Rural norms, everyone knowing your business, expecting you to fit the mold. I left the city thinking space would help. But out here, doubts creep in louder." Her fingers twisted the towel's edge, knuckles white, and I saw the weight there, family echoes pressing like the wind against the panes. Fitting in? It sounded like chains she'd slipped only to find new ones waiting in the soil. I nodded slow, the fire's warmth pulling words from me, raw as the admission burned. Hiding's what I know, my Sapphic past, women who saw me clear, loved me fierce, drove me here to avoid the pain. Town stairs, family doors, slamming shut. I built this life alone so the hurt wouldn't follow. Vulnerability spilled out, no walls left in the storm's confine, my voice cracking like thunder distant. The firelight caught her eyes, holding longer now, unflinching, as if she carried the same shadows. My hand rested on the armrest, accidental brush of her fingers against mine, skin warm and rough, sending a jolt through the quiet. We didn't pull away, the touch lingering like roots, finding water underground. She shifted then, chair creaking, and mirrored back without labels, her breath steady in the fire's flicker. I get that. Back east, expectations piled high. Marry right, live straight. But there were moments, women in the city haze, glances that lingered too long, touches that felt like home. Never named it, just buried it under the noise. Coming here? The quiet forces you to face it. Parallel paths wove between us, tentative trust forging in the unsaid, no rush to define the pull. Her hand stayed near mine, thumbs circling slow on the wood, eyes locking in the orange glow, deeper now, pulling me open. The storm raged outside, but inside, connection bloomed fragile, empathy wrapping the admissions like a shared blanket against the chill. Hands touched again, deliberate this time, her palm covering mine as thunder shook the walls. "It's scary, letting it surface," she whispered, fingers lacing tentative calluses, meeting calluses, grounding the raw edge. I squeezed back, heart thudding heavy, the fire's heat mirroring the warmth spreading low. Eyes held longer, hers searching mine in the light, seeing the woman I'd hidden, the one who'd loved without apology, only to retreat. No words needed. The touch said enough. Trust building brick by silent brick, parallels drawing us closer without force. But conflict escalated as the night wore on, external judgments looming like the storm clouds refusing to break. Clara pulled her phone from her pocket, screen lighting her face, pale. A text from the post office lady. Word of the town, potluck come Sunday. "Bring a dish, meet the neighbors proper." Her laugh came short, edged. They'll watch us close. 2 women alone, sharing coffee in storms. Whispers start there. The event hung heavy, testing our bond, conservative eyes scanning for cracks in the rural weave. I felt it coil in my gut, fear of exposure clashing with this fragile trust, the fire popping like warnings unspoken. What if they saw the touches, the lingering gazes? Pain from past loves echoed, but her hand stayed firm in mine, empathy steady, pulling me through the doubt. The rain eased to a drizzle by midnight, thunder fading to murmurs. We sat longer, vulnerabilities shared like tools passed hand to hand, the cabin holding our truths against the night. Firelight softened her features, the curve of her jaw, the way her breath matched mine. Trust settled tentative, no labels binding it, just the quiet knowing of paths crossed in hiding. Storms, confine, idam, spilled it all, parallels forging something real amid the rural press. Morning broke clear, air washed fresh, clarity settling like dew on the ridge grass. We stepped out together, boots crunching wet gravel, the trail calling up the path. Post-storm light filtered through pines, and as we walked, attraction surfaced open, her shoulder brushing mine deliberate, the wind carrying sage and possibility. The trail wound up the ridge, gravel crunching under our boots, post-storm air sharp with pine and wet earth. Clara walked beside me, her step matching mine, shoulders brushing now and then as the path narrowed between boulders. Sunlight slanted through the branches, dappling her face, and the wind tugged at her hair, carrying the faint scent of her soap mixed with rain. We'd started silent, the clarity from the night settling easy, but as we crested the first rise, words came unforced. "Last night shifted something," she said, voice low against the rustle of leaves. "That pull between us. It's real." Her eyes met mine, steady, and I felt it echo in my chest. Mutual, undeniable. Bodies leaned closer in the wind, her arm grazing mine deliberate, heat cutting the chill like sun on frost-kissed ground. I didn't pull away, the attraction surfacing open, breaths quickening in the shared rhythm. Higher up, where the trail opened to a overlook, canyon dropping sheer below, we paused. The view stretched endless, ridges folding into haze, but my focus stayed on her, the curve of her neck as she turned, the way her flannel shirt clung from the damp. Regret hit me head-on then, years of suppression cracking like dry soil under boot. "I've carried this alone too long," I admitted, voice rough, hands gripping a rock outcrop, edges biting into palms. Loving women, hiding it here, regrets like wire twisted tight in my gut, lost them to stairs, to safety I chose over fire. Vulnerability poured out, raw as the wind scouring the canyon, no more burying the ache. Clara nodded slow, her hand resting light on my arm, validating, without push. "I see that weight. No need to carry it solo. It's yours to name, not hide." Her touch grounded, empathy steady like a post driven deep, letting me breathe the truth without demand. The moment stretched, attraction flaring in her gaze, bodies inches apart, wind whispering possibility. But try-fail cycled sharp after that. We'd descend the trail, her fingers brushing mine accidental, sparking heat low, and I'd lean in, lips nearly meeting in the shade of an oak. Closeness bloomed, her breath warm on my cheek, hand sliding to my waist, but fear clamped down, memories of lost loves flashing like lightning over the ridge. I'd step back sudden, heart thudding, muttering about checking the lower fence. "Can't risk it," I'd say, voice tight, retreating down the path alone, boots pounding gravel to outrun the pull. She'd follow at distance, no chase, but her presence lingered, empathy, drawing me round again by evening. Another day sharing lunch under the same tree, her knee pressing mine, conversation turning to dreams unspoken, mine of open trails without shadows, hers of space beyond family ropes. Closeness pulled tight, her smile crinkling warm, but retreat hit when a distant truck rumbled, town eyes imagined watching. I stood abrupt, packing the basket, fear winning the round, isolation's cage snapping shut. Sensory intimacy built slow, evenings on the porch pulling us back. One dusk, air cooling fast, she brought a blanket from her house, wool rough and smelling of cedar, draping it over our shoulders as we sat side by side. Stars pricked the sky early, crickets starting low, and our breaths mingled in the cool air, Close enough, I felt the rise of her chest against my arm. Her hand found mine under the folds, fingers lacing tentative, calluses scraping soft, sending warmth pooling deep. We'd talk fragments, her city doubts, my ridge regrets, voices dropping to whispers, the blanket a shared shelter against the night. Her thumb traced my knuckle, slow circles, and I'd lean in, foreheads nearly touching, the scent of her skin, earth and faint lavender, filling the space. Desire twisted, bodies shifting closer, but fear flickered, pulling me to stand, blanket slipping. Wind's picking up, I'd say, retreating inside, door clicking shut, heart racing in the empty room. Cycles wore on, closeness followed by retreat, each fail etching deeper. Mornings in the garden, her joining to weed rose beside me, knees sinking into soil, arms brushing as we reached for the same stubborn root. The earth turned between us, damp and rich. Her laugh light when mud flecked her cheek, drawing me to wipe it with my thumb. Touch, lingering electric. But a neighbor's truck passing the fence line snapped me back. Fear of whispers rising like dust. I'd hand her the hoe, stepping away. Got fences calling. Her nod came understanding, no pressure. But the pull reeled me in by noon. Sharing water from the same canteen, lips on the rim where hers had been, intimacy building in the unsaid. Conservative pressures peaked one afternoon, truck tires crunching gravel loud as old man Ellis pulled up unannounced, his face weathered under the hat brim. He leaned from the window, eyes flicking between my porch and Clara's house, visible beyond. "Heard you two been thick as thieves," he said, voice gravel over the engine rumble, implication hanging heavy like smoke from his pipe. "Town potluck Sunday. Best keep things neighborly proper." Judgments rooted deep, his gaze probing for cracks, the hollow's narrow weave tightening around us. Fear surged, exposure's shadow long. But Clara stepped out then, from her yard, arms crossed steady. "We'll be there," she called, voice firm, joining me at the gate, shoulder against mine in defensive solidarity. Ellis grunted, truck backing slow, but the weight lingered, pressures forcing us closer, her hand squeezing mine, hidden from view. "We stand together," she murmured, empathy cutting the chill, solidarity a shield against the stairs. Evening alone reignited the spark. Cabin quiet after his visit, lamplight spilling soft. I sat at the table, hands idle on the wood grain, regrets churning when she knocked light, slipping in with a pie from her oven, crust golden, steam carrying apple and cinnamon. We ate slow, forks scraping plates, her foot nudging mine under the table. Deliberate now. Breaths mingled close, the air thickening, attraction flaring hot. Her eyes held mine over the candle flicker, seeing through the fear, pulling toward confrontation in the shadowed room. The pie sat half-eaten between us, but the sweetness was a distraction. We both knew we weren't talking about dessert. That pie sat half-eaten between us, crust crumbling on the plate, the candle's flame steady now, casting her face in soft gold. Clara set her fork down, the scrape loud in the quiet cabin, her eyes locking on mine with a weight that pinned me still. The air thickened, heavy with the cinnamon scent, and the spark we'd fanned all evening, her foot still nudging mine under the table, warm through sock and boot. I felt the confrontation building, like thunder rolling slow over the ridge, inevitable. "Martha," she said, voice low and unflinching, leaning forward so her elbows thudded soft on the wood. "I've seen you from the start, not the solitary woman mending fences alone, the real you, the one who loves women, who carries that fire under the quiet. I knew at that first knock. Your eyes held it, like a secret shared in the dusk." Her words hit like a hammer on taut wire, snapping something deep inside. Direct. No skirting the shadows we danced around. Vulnerability flooded me, raw as rain-soaked earth, years of isolation cracking open in my chest. I froze, breath catching sharp, the chair creaking under me as I pushed back, but she reached across, hand covering mine firm, calluses grounding like roots in the storm-tossed soil, tears welled hot, blurring her face, the dam I'd built, fence posts, and buried regrets, giving way. "How?" I choked out, voice breaking rough, the questions spilling with the salt on my cheeks. She'd seen through the reserve, the quick retreats, straight to the Sapphic heart I'd shielded from this hollow's judgments. No hiding now, the truth laid bare on the scarred table, her thumb stroking my knuckles, slow, steady. I broke then, fully, standing abrupt, chair tipping back with a thud that echoed my unraveling. She rose too, no hesitation, arms opening as I stepped into them, the tearful embrace swallowing me whole. Her body fit against mine, solid and warm, flannel rough on my cheek as sobs shook loose, releasing the isolation's weight like burdens dropped from weary shoulders. Years poured out. Ellie's laugh lost to family pulls. Rose's touch faded under stares, the solitude I'd chosen twisting into a cage of my own making. I hid to survive, I whispered against her neck, tears soaking. Her collar, her scent of earth and lavender filling my lungs. She held tighter, hands splaying across my back, fingers pressing deep, empathy in every inch. "You don't have to anymore," she murmured, voice thick, her own breath ragged now, the storm inside me mirroring hers. Physical pull converged with the emotional flood, her hands sliding up to cup my face, thumbs wiping tears gentle, eyes holding mine in the candle's flicker. The kiss started tentative, lips brushing soft like testing wind on chilled skin, her mouth warm and yielding against mine. I leaned in, heart thudding heavy, the taste of her, salt from my tears, sweetness from the pie, igniting the spark we'd banked so long. It deepened slow, tongues meeting hesitant, then sure, her fingers tangling in my hair, pulling me closer as bodies pressed flush. Heat built, her hip against mine, breaths mingling ragged, the cabin shrinking to just this. Affirmation in every slide, every gasp. No more suppression. The connection affirmed us. Sapphic truths blooming free. Her moan low against my lips, sealing the raw honesty. Internal storm resolved in that hold. Acceptance washing through like creek water after thaw. No regret for the loves lost, just the woman I was. Fierce, hidden no more, emerging in her arms. "This is me," I breathed when we broke, foreheads touching, her eyes unflinching, validating the identity I'd reclaimed. The hollow's pressures faded against this anchor, fear of whispers turning to resolve. We'd face them together, her hand in mine, a promise stronger than any judgment. Outside, town murmurs hummed, faint. Ellis's truck long gone, but the potluck loomed, eyes waiting to probe. Yet we chose hope. Stepping back to the table, her arm around my waist, solidarity in the quiet. Whispers couldn't touch this bond, rooted deep as ridge pines weathering storms. The aftermath settled soft, our hands linked over cooling coffee, reflections turning to the path ahead, solid now. Days after that night blended into a new rhythm, the hollow feeling less like a cage and more like shared ground. Morning started with her knock soft on the door, Clara stepping in with coffee steaming in 2 mugs, the scent cutting the chill like sun on ridge frost. We'd sit at the table, knees touching under the wood, planning the chores ahead, her hands steady on the list, mine tracing the grain beside hers. Open affection wove and subtle, a brush of fingers when passing the hammer, her shoulder leaning into mine as we mended the shared fence line, wire taut under our grips. No hiding now. The touches lingered, deliberate, her palm warm on my lower back as we walked the trail, boots, crunching gravel in sync. Strength came from that unity. Her presence, an anchor against the wind's pull, turning isolation's weight to something shared, lighter. I embraced it deep, the core truth settling like roots in turned soil. No regret for the woman I was, Sapphic heart beating open under the flannel, and calluses, past losses. Ellie's laugh echoing faint, Rose's touch a scar softened. Didn't chain me anymore. Clara saw it all, validating without words, her nod slow when I'd pause mid-chore, hoe in hand, staring at the horizon. "You're whole here," she'd say, voice low, pulling me back with a squeeze of my waist, empathy grounding the revelations. The garden thrived under our hands, rows of beans climbing trellises we'd built together, dirt caking our nails like badges of this new life. Evenings brought more. Her cooking stew on my stove, steam rising thick with onions and herbs from our patch, our laughter mixing with the sizzle, Bodies close in the narrow kitchen, hip to hip. Her arrival transformed the solitude into home, rural quiet now filled with her step on the porch boards, her breath steady beside me at dawn. The old house next door hummed with our back and forth, borrowing tools that turned to shared repairs, walks that stretched long under the pines, wind tugging our hair as hands clasped firm. Town pressures lingered, whispers at the store, turning heads when we shopped side by side. But we faced them steady. Her arm linked mine at the potluck. Plates passed with smiles that defied the stares. No more retreat. Connection anchored us. Her eyes meeting mine across the crowded hall, unflinching, pulling me through the judgments like a hand extended in storm. Final payoff came one evening, sun dipping low behind the canyon, painting the sky in bruised oranges and purples. We sat on the porch steps, blanket draped over our legs, wool rough and warm. Her head rested on my shoulder, breath even against my neck, hands clasped firm in my lap, fingers laced tight. The ridge stretched endless below, but here, in that hold, everything felt rooted. Desires no longer suppressed, isolation traded for this quiet fire. No words needed, the sunset sealed it, light fading slow, our path forward promised in the clasp that didn't break. Dawn broke soft over the porch, two figures silhouetted against the rising light, hands still linked as the hollow stirred awake. If you've hidden parts of yourself in quiet places like this, share your stories of finding connection below. They might light someone's way. Subscribe for more tales of Sapphic resilience, where rural hearts find home in each other.